Well, welcome everybody. It's great to be at Cafe Shapira.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, everyone can sit down now. Thank you very much for the standing ovation. I appreciate it. So today we're going to have much fun. I'm going to discuss everything that's wrong in the world and how to fix it in about 10 minutes. And then we're going to discuss everything that's wrong in Israel and how to fix it in 10 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, everyone will know how to fix everything in the world.
And we start to work.
Yes. And then we can have some questions and answers. So for those of you who do not know me, I'm Kenneth Abramowitz, and I am the author of the book called The Multi-Front War, written 4 years ago, but with 2 updates. And I have a website to save Western civilization called savethewest.com. Everyone should subscribe. I write an article every 2 weeks, and you will get my articles after you subscribe. For those of you interested in 1 minute of history of myself, I'm a business analyst in the healthcare field for the past 45 years. I work every day except Shabbat, 6 days a week. And I focus on understanding healthcare and the industry from the investment point of view until 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, everybody was shocked and everybody had a different reaction. And my reaction was that since I'm an analyst, analysts only do one thing. That's we analyze. It's not complicated. And so I decided to analyze why 9/11 took place, who did it, why did they do it, what should we do about it. Nobody asked me to do this. Nobody paid me to do this. I just did it as a citizen of society, as a public service. So I devoted 1 day a week to understanding national security starting on 9/11. I was unhappy with the analysis on television. And I used to say to myself, I'm sure you say this to yourselves too, when you're listening on television and someone says something and you do not like what they say, you feel like jumping into the television set, running into the studio, and then explaining to the announcer what the real answer should have been. But of course, you cannot do that. So I started a 25-year crusade to teach myself national security. Now, I spend 50% of my time, 3 days a week, on national security, 3 days a week on healthcare analysis and investment. And I do the two at the same time. And the 3 days in healthcare is my job, and 3 days in national security is my public service. So I have an expression about myself. I try to make more money during the 3 days that I work than I lose during my 3 days of public service. Every week is a challenge, and but I enjoy the challenge. So today, let's discuss everything that's wrong in the world today. And I have a slide. Maybe you can make it available to everyone who's not here specifically today. But I'll just show everybody the slide. It's the pie chart with the yellows and the whites, the red, green, and blue. And let me explain the color code. Everyone here listening to me is yellow for the sunlight of Western civilization, the sunlight of democracy, the sunlight of the Torah, the sunlight of basic laws. In America, we call it Constitution and Bill of Rights, the secular law. You put together the secular law and the religious law, which are interrelated. It's really the same, because the origin of our secular law came from the Torah. So it's not difficult to put the two together, and you become yellow, or what I call a rational centrist. For example, I'm a centrist. Everybody asks me or you who you are, and I'm a centrist, and everybody else is to my left. But I'm still a centrist. And we believe in the rule of law. Now, good people can also be color-coded white for the surrender flag. They're wonderful people. They believe in the rule of law, but they do not want to fight. So I color-code them white for the surrender flag. Now, we just read the parasha of the 12 spies. And Caleb and Joshua would be color-coded yellow. And we remember them. The other 10 spies, we do not remember them. They would be color-coded white. And that's why we do not remember them, because although they were distinguished members of their tribes, they were not there to fight for the early Israel. And so this tension between yellows and whites has been going on forever and ever. And this is just a good example from the Torah. So it's based in human nature. Not everybody's a fighter. And it's not that people are bad if they're not being a fighter. Everyone has their families, their jobs. The kids have to go to school. They're preparing for a vacation. It's not that they're bad people. But it's just very difficult to have a nation when only a portion wants to fight and the other portion does not want to fight. Now let's focus on the bad guys. The bad guys are color-coded red, green, and blue. The reds are the traditional color for communists. That would be China, Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, among others. The greens, the traditional color for Islam, but here I'm not talking about Islam, I'm talking about Islamists. These are countries or organizations that want to impose Islam on somebody else. That would be Iran, representing the Shiites, about 15% of Muslims. And for the Sunnis, it would be Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan, who are funding the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood I call a cultural terror organization, and the Iran I call a physical terror organization. The difference is that Iran, which I call a death cult, with their 500,000 worldwide terrorists, largest terror organization in the world, ever in the world, they just physically want to kill. We saw that, obviously, on October 7th, where they did not care who they killed. They just wanted to kill anyone they could find. Age did not matter, whether they were Jewish, Muslim, Jews, Bedouin, nothing mattered. They were just out to kill everybody they could find in Israel. So I call Iran and its terror organization a death cult. The Muslim Brotherhood is a cultural death cult, not a physical death cult. So Qatar and Turkey and Pakistan don't necessarily send agents throughout the world killing everybody, but they have mosques, schools, books, television, radio, and they educate the children into a false narrative. Not that Islam's a false narrative. It's not my religion. I do not believe in it. But I do not call Islam a false narrative, but Islamism is a false narrative by definition. For example, let's look at Christians. If a Protestant and a Catholic saw each other on the street, and the Protestant said to the Catholic, you really should be Protestant, and for 3 reasons in 20 seconds, and if you do not become a Protestant, I'm going to kill you, that person would be in jail. Similarly, in Judaism, if someone who's Orthodox saw someone who's Heleni and said, you should be Orthodox, think about it for 30 seconds. If you do not become Orthodox, I'm going to kill you. All those people would go to jail in 1 second. So my argument is Islamists, people trying to impose Islam on someone else, should be in jail, either as individuals or as countries. And now let's go to the blues. The blues are the globalists, color-coded for the United Nations color of their uniforms. And it also includes the World Economic Forum, the drug cartels, and the social media companies. These are global organizations, and they do not kill anybody. They're cultural organizations, but they have policies that they're trying to impose. You could call them cultural terrorists. They have policies that they're trying to impose on the world.
Do they include Claudine Gay? Do they include the former dean of Harvard, Claudine Gay?
Yes, well, she would be a, she could be a blue, she could also be a red. Sometimes, although I try to make it simple, reds, greens, blues, sometimes there's people who you can be 2 or 3 colors at the same time. For example, President Obama was a red, a green, and a blue at the same time.
And black.
And black.
Yeah, and
So are BLM.
yeah. So there's some common characteristics of the reds, the greens, and the blues. The reds, the greens, and the blues, all of which are dictatorships, have declared war on the yellows and the whites, which are democracies. So one obvious question is, why did the dictatorships declare war on the democracies? In round numbers, half the people in the world live in a democracy, and half live in a dictatorship. So the democracies just go about their normal business, but the dictatorships declared war on them. Why? Democracies, to use an American term from our Declaration of Independence, believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people. These rights have been given by Hashem, and it's a right to all human beings. So all human beings deserve the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what a normal American would say. But the dictatorships believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for 10% of the people, namely me, my family, and my friends, but not everybody else. That's what a dictatorship is. So the reason the dictatorships are afraid of the democracies is not because of something we did, it's because that we exist. And they're afraid that the 90% of the people in their country that they're oppressing and stealing money from, one day will say, Mr. Dictator, why are you oppressing me? Why do I not get the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness like the Americans or like the Israelis? And I want to be like the Americans and Israelis. I deserve that right. And the dictator says, no, you only have the rights that I give you, and I did not give you the right to life, liberty, and happiness. And then what happens is you get a revolution. And over time, the revolution enters the palace of the dictator, and the dictator is killed. So the dictators are afraid of their own people. That's their number one enemy, is the 90% of the people that they're oppressing right in their own country. And therefore, we set a bad example. We, the West, we, democracy, we set a bad example for the kings of dictators who are afraid of the infection to their own people. Now, let me discuss a few other characteristics of the reds, the greens, and the blues. So I have 10 characteristics that I have here. Number one, I already mentioned, they're dictators, but I did not mention they all want to take over the world. All the reds, the greens, and blues all want to take over the world and make us their slaves. Number two, they're all unelected. Number three, they all hate Torah. They hate Jews and Christians. They hate our Torah, they hate the New Testament. They hate the rule of law because they want to write the rule of law. And they also hate God. They hate God because they want to be God. In general, they hate the rule of law. I already discussed they believe in life, liberty, and happiness for 10% of the people. They hate democracy. They hate freedom of speech. And I call them criminals. The Reds, the Greens, and the Blues are all criminal organizations. And my favorite word to describe them, which is the theme of tonight's talk, is that they're pagans. They're modern-day pagans. So the fight that we're fighting is a long fight. It's been going on since the beginning of humans. If you want to look at more modern times, the Red War began in 1917 when Lenin and his communist criminals illegally took over Russia in a coup. The Green War began 1,400 years when Muhammad and his criminals illegally left what we now call Saudi Arabia and invaded half of the Christian world and took it over, and no one even remembers because it was 1,400 years ago and no one knows history anymore. And the Blue War began in 1923 with the League of Nations, which then became the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. So this World War III, what I call World War III, is actually World War I. And it's been going on for hundreds of years. And if you go back into the Torah, Reds, Greens, and Blues have another name that I like to use. They're the Amalekites from 3,400 years ago. So the Amalekite War has not ended. And as you know from the Torah, we were told to remember the Amalekites and never forget the Amalekites. And what happened is we forgot the Amalekites. On October 7th, Israel forgot the Amalekites, even though they were warned that in every generation, someone will rise up to destroy the Jews. And they forgot. The point I'm getting to is every day is World War III. Every day is World War I. There's no such thing as peace. Human beings are not capable of living in peace. They only live in war, just like animals. And so, therefore, we have to pretend that every day is war, and we have to be prepared for that every day. And we can never sleep. Just like animals have trouble sleeping at night because they're afraid someone's going to eat them. So, last point here. How many wars are we fighting? Well, we're fighting three enemies, Reds, Greens, and Blues, but they're groups of enemies. But to make it simple, let's just say Reds, Greens, and Blues. And they use 7 forms of warfare against us. So what's the definition of war? Number 1, kinetic. That's when things blow up. Number 2, chemical, biological. COVID, for example. Number 3, cultural. That's when we fight with words. Economic, we fight with dollars or shekels. Legal, we fight with lawyers. Demographic, we fight with people or movement of people. And number 7, cyber. So if you multiply 3 groups of enemies, Reds, Greens, Blues, times 7 forms of warfare, 3 times 7 is 21. So in World War III, we're fighting 21 wars simultaneously. Now, can any of you do 21 things at the same time?
Easy.
So I'm probably the only person who can do 21 things at the same time because my wife often tells me to do 21 things at the same time. And so I've learned how to do it. But other people may not know how to do it. The point I'm getting to, this is a management problem. How does a country or a company do 21 things? Well, you need a management team, obviously. It cannot be done by one person. Even Moshe Rabbeinu learned the lesson that he could not manage the Jewish people as one person. And his father-in-law told him, what you're doing is not good. You have too much power in your hands. You have to delegate to the judiciary. You have to delegate to the Knesset, which they called the 70 elders of the land at that time, or the Sanhedrin. And so division of power is a basic element of democracy. And so Israel, all democracies have a management problem of not being able to handle 21 challenges at the same time. And they have to learn how to do it, because the bad guys can do 21 things at the same time. Sometimes I have a joke to myself that I get on an airplane and I go to China, and I tell the taxi driver to take me to President Xi and pretend that I have an appointment with President Xi, and I show him this page, and I say, President Xi, I'm an analyst from America, and there's Reds, Greens, and Blues, and 7 forms of warfare, and 7 times 3 is 21, and there's 21 wars, and then he starts laughing, and there's a management problem of managing the 21 things at the same, and he starts laughing, and he says, You came all the way from Florida to tell me this? I'm managing World War III. I'm the king. I'm the dictator. And I know there's 21 fronts because I'm managing each of them. I control the reds and the greens and the blues and the 7 forms of warfare that you mentioned. And thank you for your advice, but I'm way ahead of you.
What are you doing?
That's right. You can go back to America now, and I hope you have a nice trip. Yes, that's right. The dictatorships have a major advantage over the democracy because one person can order 21 departments, divisions, agencies to do something, whereas in a democracy, a president or a prime minister can ask 21 agencies to do something, but maybe they agree and maybe they don't. And but the dictatorships have a big disadvantage that when they make a mistake, it's a big mistake. For example, take China. About 50 years ago, they came up with a brilliant idea that every family should have 1 child. That's it, just brilliant, because they had over 1 billion people and they have to feed 1 billion people. So everyone should have 1 child. And they kept that policy for over 30 years. And then they realized it was a mistake because, as you know, with generations, you have 2 parents and 1 child. Over time, the population will start falling, obviously. And so here's a good example of one leader, dictator, said, I decided everyone should have 1 child. And for 30, 40 years, no one stopped it. Now it's too late. I was watching on YouTube several months ago, someone put out, someone who knows something about demography, and he said, India and China each have 1.4 billion people, and by the year 2100, India will have 1.8 billion people, and China will have 800 million people. Because they're in an irreversible decline of population. You can't produce babies fast enough, and you can't grow them fast enough to produce babies fast enough to make up for almost 2 generations of 1 baby policy. So that's a good example of someone, yes, a dictator says, I'm making this decision. Yeah, he can make the decision, and he can impose it on the society. But when you make a mistake, it's a gigantic mistake. And nobody wanted to reverse it until it became so obvious that it was a catastrophic mistake for China. Catastrophic. And they may never recover from this mistake. So, okay, let's go to the next page. Let's look at Israel now. For the camera, this is my pretty Israel map. And it discusses Israel's 10-front war. Now, again, this is a management problem. In this example, Israel has to do 10 things at the same time. I'm not showing it tonight, but I have a comparable map on America and Europe. Every time I look at a region or a country, I try to identify the 10 key challenges. And here the key messages is the leadership of the country have to manage all 10 challenges simultaneously. It's not like a restaurant where maybe they have 10 things to eat and you pick 2 of them. When in national security, if you have 10 challenges, you have to have 10 answers to the 10 challenges. Because the bad guys, the reds, greens, and blues, are looking to attack whenever they see weakness, just like their friends, the Amalekites, many years ago. So the Amalekites looked at the Jews walking through the desert, saw the Jews at the end of the line, and they were maybe old or young or children, and pregnant, and they said, these are the people we should attack. And at that time, the early Israelites did not protect the whole length of the population walking through the desert, and the Amalekites attacked. So what happened in Israel is number 6. Number 6 was the Gaza border. And Israel fell asleep on number 6, and the bad guys took advantage of that. It shouldn't have happened. It's a repeat of the Yom Kippur War, and it's a repeat of 9/11 in America, and it's a repeat of Pearl Harbor in America. The point I'm getting to is Israel's not the only country that fell asleep for one day. So America did it, and Pearl Harbor was inexcusable, 9/11 inexcusable, Yom Kippur War same, and October 7th. So one obvious question is, who's at fault?
State Department.
Well, I identified that there's, and I wrote something on my website, savethewest.com. I identified 10 people and organizations who were involved. Let's just say 1,000 people to make it simple. And in Pearl Harbor, I'm not a historian, but if I did that exercise, I probably would have found another 1,000 people who were at fault on Pearl Harbor. Notice, by the way, nobody criticizes Franklin Roosevelt, the president of the time, for Pearl Harbor. Nobody said to him 6 months later, you should resign right now. Do not wait for the election in 4 years. Just resign because you allowed Pearl Harbor. The reason nobody did that is because we were in a war. And when you're in a war, you fight a war to win. You do not change your government to address the war. Number two, the reason no one blames Franklin Roosevelt is he won the war. He said, I'm going to defeat our enemies, unconditional surrender. I do not know how long it will take. It ended up taking 4 years or so. But we're going to win until unconditional surrender. That was the correct strategy. There was no negotiation possible with Germany, which was a death cult, and Japan, which was a death cult, both dictatorships, and there was nothing to discuss other than unconditional surrender. He won the war, and everybody credits him with winning the war, and nobody blames him for Pearl Harbor. So what's going on in Israel to me is a repeat of that. There's no sense discussing new governments. The only discussion should be unconditional surrender. Now the question is, unconditional surrender of who? Unconditional surrender of the 40,000 death cult members of Hamas? Yes. Unconditional surrender of 50,000 Houthis in Yemen? Yes. Unconditional surrender of 75,000 Hezbollah death cult members in Lebanon? Yes. And of course, the big question is Iran. Iran is the largest death cult in the history of the world. 500,000 operatives, maybe 600,000. And so Iran must be defeated, unconditional surrender, I would say within the next 2 years. Now then the question is, who's going to do all of this? Well, these death cult members want to kill all the Jews, but they also want to kill all the Christians and they want to kill all the Hindus. They want to kill everybody because it's a death cult. Just as we saw on October 7th, they did not ask, are you Jewish? Or are you Druze? Are you Muslim? Are you Christian? Are you Thai? From Thailand? No, it's just, we see you, we kill you. Okay. So the Christians are at equal risk and the Hindus are at equal risk to the Jews from this death cult. So in a perfect world, Europe, Christians, America, Christians, India, Hindus, would be sending their military leaders to Israel and say, Iran just declared war on civilization. They declared war on Jews, Christians, and Hindus, and we are here to help you to coordinate our activities to defeat this death cult until unconditional surrender. Did that happen? No. Why did it not happen? In effect, what the world did is say, Israel was attacked by the death cult, then it must be Israel's problem. And therefore, we will help Israel financially or help Israel in terms of weapons. Israel does not need our soldiers in any case. And so we will stand from afar and watch Israel, 10 million people, 8 million Jews, fight 90 million Iranians. By the way, 80% of them are wonderful people, or 90% are wonderful people, but 10% are the death cult. And we're going to let Jews bleed and fight and do all the heavy lifting to save civilization. Now, one obvious question is, why is Israel doing all of this? Besides for Israel, it's doing it for the Christians and the Hindus. Why is Israel doing this? First, it has no choice. Second of all, the rest of the world knows that Israel has no choice. And that's why they're not helping as much as they should. But the third reason is that Israel, through the Torah, is the mother of Western civilization, the mother of democracy, the mother of modern civilization. Everybody else is the cousin, the aunt, the uncle, the sister-in-law, whatever. And so, as you know, mothers behave differently than aunts and uncles. So as the mother of Western civilization, Israel has the maternal responsibility to save Western civilization, and that's exactly what Israel is doing and will be doing. Israel will simply have to either make or buy or find all the bombs that are needed to destroy the Hamas death cult and the Lebanon Hezbollah death cult. Hopefully, with a new president on November 5 in America, together, America will do a better job with the British and others, destroying the Houthi Yemen death cult. And then America, and hopefully some other countries working with Israel, will destroy the Iranian death cult in about 1 year. Now, they don't know that. America doesn't know that. President Trump doesn't know that. Because not that our leaders are bad people, they think that Iran is a Jewish problem, not a Christian problem. But they will eventually come to their senses and realize that it's a Christian problem, and therefore the Christians must fight because Israel cannot, well, Israel can do everything by itself, but it's just not right for Israel to have to do everything by itself when America can so easily help, particularly in Yemen and in Iran. I think I will stop at this point, and with one last comment. November 5th is the most important election ever in America since the very beginning. And I'm purposely wearing a hat that says on it 1776, which is our founding of America. I could have put a hat on that said 1948 for Israel, the modern founding of Israel. And the reason, and we have July 4th, of course, is coming up very shortly. And the reason I'm wearing the hat is that America is still fighting its war of independence, and Israel is still fighting its war of independence. Not from the British. We were both controlled by the British years ago. But America and Israel are seeking independence from the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. The Reds, the Greens, and the Blues have declared war on Israel, but they also declared war on America. They've infiltrated into America and into Israel. And both of our countries have to remove the Reds and Greens, the infection, intellectual, cultural infection to our country from the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues in order to regain our independence. It's a huge challenge, but we're up to the challenge. But we need the proper leadership. As a final point, on November 5th, people think the election is between Republicans and Democrats. I call the election competition between God and the pagans. And on November 5th, we're going to find out whether America is controlled by God, under Hashem, or by the pagans or the Amalekites or the devil, if you want to say. And this is a biblical battle coming up. And so sometimes I say to myself, oh, they should start writing the Bible again, writing the Torah again. They ended it too soon. They ended it with Moshe's life 3,400 or so years ago. The Torah is still ongoing. We're still fighting for our culture and for our country, and we should restart the Torah again. They ended it too soon. But of course, life does not work that way. But in our imagination, we're fighting a battle of biblical proportions between good and evil, between, as I said, Hashem and the pagans. And I'm going to bet on Hashem. So thank you for all of your time.
Any questions, maybe?
Okay. Does anybody have some questions? Yes, so the question is, how are we dealing with this mess? Well, I mean, let me give you this answer. In the American Constitution, when the founding fathers created the country, they had an expression in the Constitution, "We the people." So they basically said, we the people are going to fix this and fix that, and independence, and because we cannot rely on the King of England, of course. The country was too small to have its own government. I mean, there was the beginnings of the government. But basically it said, we the people are going to fix this mess. Now let's fast forward to October 7th. On October 7th, the IDF did not function, and the government did not function. Who saved Israel? It was we the people. Not me, but I mean, we the Israeli people, jumped into October 7th and saved the country until the IDF could regain its composure and the government could regain its decision-making abilities. In that 1 or 2 days, we the people saved Israel. I'll just give you one anecdote. I came to Israel in February with a delegation from America, about 50 Jewish leaders. And they took us to the Gaza envelope. And we had many different speakers. But this one I remember the most. A 50-year-old man stood up and said to our audience, he says, I'm 50 years old, and I'm going to describe what happened to October 7th to me. He said, I heard the news. I think the bad guys attacked around 6:30, and around 7 o'clock, I saw on my phone these messages, and I knew there was something big wrong. And I opened my closet, and I looked at my uniform from 5 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel, and I put it on, still fit, and I took my M16 and one magazine of bullets, put it in the back seat of my car, and I said to my wife, I've been called up by the IDF. And then he says to us, the audience, he says, no one called me the IDF. I'm 50 years old. I'm not in the IDF anymore. I'm not in the Mila Whip. No one would think of calling me. But if I told her the truth, she would say to me, no, you're not going to Gaza. What, are you crazy? He said, I drove as fast as I could for 2 hours from the north to the south. I got to the gasoline station in State Road, and it was all burnt up. He says, I knew I was close to the problem. And I asked some people and talked with a few people, and I drove right to the Nova Festival. I found 5 young people and put them in my little car and drove them out. He said, then I saw a bus, 3 buses, with the bus drivers in them, and I said to them, you have to go to the Nova Festival and collect as many of the kids as possible. And they said, no, it's too dangerous. We're not going. So he said, I'm a lieutenant colonel in the IDF. I'm ordering you to drive that bus and go get those kids. The buses, he said, I had no right to order them to do anything. But they listened to me. They drove, and we saved 100 kids in the buses. So this is just one anecdote. I'm sure there's another 487, and I do not know them. But we, the people, saved Israel, just like we, the people, saved America. And on November 5th, we, the people, are going to save America again. And you and all the Israelis are going to save, we, the people of Israel, are going to save Israel.
May I ask?
Thank you very much for a very elaborate, interesting exposition. I have not a question, just a comment about the worries of the Chinese. I mean, there are 800 million is not enough. I mean, where's the worry? I mean, that's for another lecture probably. But the question that I have now is directed straight to you. The way you present the problematic world, it's an analysis. I'm very much interested in how we cope with it, how we change the world. And I know that Jews all through history tried to make big revolutions, like communism and different revolutions. And I don't see a real chance for you, and even if you have a big group around you, or people that follow you, or people that support you, that you can change this complicated situation in the West, or in the, as you said, in the different colors. So what is your motivation? How you go save the West, right? Well, you speak in general, let's save the West. It is important to save the West. I want you to know that the West is in a difficult situation. What is your motivation? And what chance do you give to the possibility of changing? You said 21 and all these calculations or this pile of difficulties. Well, and if you answer this question, then I have in my pocket another question, an easier one to follow. But first, please answer me this.
Okay, great.
Okay. Not about the Chinese.
She's like learning. First it will be hard and then it will be less difficult.
Just quickly on China, when you have buildings and factories that are capable of holding 1.4 billion people or workers, and suddenly, not suddenly, but over years, it becomes 800 million, you basically have twice as much infrastructure as you need. And so the factories will be half productive, and the apartment buildings will be half empty, and your army will be half the size.
It's actually, I've got a great solution for China. We've got 2 million Palestinians to lend them.
They
Right.
can accept them.
Now the answer is, how can we, the people, or we as individuals, make a change? So whenever I see my grandchildren, I give them a present. This is a $2 bill, American $2 bill. It's not used very much, but it's available. Banks have it, but no, you do not see it much in America, but I always have it. And on the back are the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. So I was showing this, so my, at the time, 10-year-old said to me, "Grandpa, why do you always give us $2 bills?" And I said, "Well, they're historic. Look at the back. Look at the back. It has the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence." And I said, "Were these people brave?" And she goes, you know how kids go like that, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And I said, "And what would have happened if they had lost the war with England?" She said one word, "Dead." I go, "That's exactly what would have happened to them." But these were 56 people, okay? This was we the people, right here, we the people. But they were very brave people, very determined people. And they risked their lives and their fortunes, because they were all rich people. You don't get on an American bill if you're not rich, just like you don't get into the Torah if you're not rich, right? Everyone in the Torah is rich, and because they were successful people. But they did not just sit on their wealth, okay? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob did much more than just say, "I'm rich. I have all these animals and all this milk and food," just like our founding fathers. So you need a nucleus of people, but not millions. But you need 56 people like this, in the equivalent, who will risk everything. Right now in America, we only have one person in that category, and that's President Trump. And in Israel, you have Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, neither Trump nor Netanyahu are perfect. Human beings are not perfect. But they're the best leaders you're going to get. And so the Israeli people and the American people have to support the best leader that they have and try to make him better. Not necessarily through the leader, but through the staff. So I spend much time trying to meet the 25 people surrounding Trump or surrounding Prime Minister Netanyahu because I, as an individual, can get time with them. It's very difficult for an individual to spend much time with a prime minister or a president. And and I personally speak to 100 congressmen, senators, governors, and attorney generals and their counterparts in Israel. And I spend half my time doing this. And every year for 8 years, I give 100 presentations. This year, I've told myself I want to give 150 presentations before November 5th. So, but the world needs a lot more than me. And it needs you and your friends. We need the equivalent of 56 brave people because the leader can't do it by himself. Trump, as capable as he is, or Netanyahu, as capable as he is, cannot defeat the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues, which is half the world, which are all criminal organizations and different degrees of death counts. They need help. And just as Moshe Rabbeinu got help from the judiciary, which, by the way, he appointed, Jethro said to Moshe, you pick the judges. He did not say, let 15 judges pick themselves, and then the 16 and 17. And Yitro said, and you let the judges make the little decisions in the beginning, and then only the big decisions and the major decisions and the most difficult decisions, then you get involved. The Israel Supreme Court lets everybody petition the Supreme Court, and the Israel Supreme Court violates the Torah. The irony is the American Constitution is loyal to the Torah. That's the irony. The Christians in America in 1776 listened to the wisdom of the Torah and used it to create our balance of power, whereas the Israel Supreme Court ignored the wisdom of the Torah.
It's the law. It violates the law itself.
I have an expression that bad people are good at being bad, and good people are bad at being good.
Wow, that's good.
So, however good we are, we have to be better than we are, okay? So, we have to improve our abilities to be good, our abilities to learn, our abilities to communicate to other people, to communicate to more and more people. So, we all have a lot of work to do, but in order to deserve being on the $2 bill or the equivalent, these people deserved it. Okay, they did what they had to do, and now we, the people, have to do what we have to do. And we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, wow. Daniela.